This is Support is Sexy, episode 108, with Brandice Daniel, founder and CEO of Harlem's Fashion Row. Welcome to the Support is Sexy podcast. I'm your host, Elayne Fluker, entrepreneur, author, producer, and founder of Chic Rebellion Media. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I talk to women entrepreneurs who share their journeys and the true stories of their wins and their lessons, and give you insight and inspiration to take your business and your life to the next level. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Support is Sexy. I am so happy to have you here because it just would not be the same without you. And today we have a very sexy and fashionable episode for you. I'm so excited to welcome Brandice Daniel. And Brandice is the founder and CEO of Harlem's Fashion Row, which if you don't know about it, well, you're about to learn all about it. But it is truly one of New York Fashion Week's premier events, especially for designers, makeup artists, and other creatives of color. Brandice founded Harlem's Fashion Row in 2007, and it has grown and expanded over the years. And she will share with us on this episode how the idea came about, how she started the business, how tough it was, which, Brandice, I so appreciate your honesty in this episode about the low points, which we need to hear about as much as we need to hear the high points in everyone's journey. We all have a story. As I always say, Support is Sexy is all about strategy wrapped in powerful storytelling, and Brandice is a powerful storyteller. So you will get to hear about her journey down the runway, as I say, to create Harlem's Fashion Row. But not only that, creating her new podcast that she co-hosts called the Great Girlfriends Podcast, how she also built the community around that, and all of those wonderful things that she's up to, and how she's continuing to grow her brand, Harlem's Fashion Row, the Great Girlfriends, and her personal brand. So on this episode, you're going to learn how to know that you're quote unquote on the right floor, as Brandice calls it, how to pay attention to that thing that you're drawn to for some reason, even if you don't know why. Also, why proximity is power. A step back is different than a setback. How to make sure you stand out with your ask. The importance of taking inspired action when that bright idea hits you. How many of us sit and wait and mull over it and keep thinking about it and never take any kind of action? Brandice talks about how she took action when that inspiration hit her, truly in the moment. The importance of what she calls the cliff jump. Also, the biggest lesson that she learned about sponsorships, which I thought was very powerful. Figuring out the best times of day that you are most productive, and why you have to meet the universe halfway. I am a big believer in that. We all have the power to create the things that we want to create in our lives. And Brandice talks about how she adopted that for herself as well and truly co-created her life and her vision for the kind of business that she wanted to create. So I know you're going to love this episode. Plenty of great resources in here. So to get all of that information, go to supportissexypodcast.com and search for Brandice, Brandice. You'll see her show notes page with the link to the websites, the resources, and all of the things that she mentions in this episode that you will probably want to follow up on, in addition to a course that she offers also on sponsorships. So supportissexypodcast.com. Go there, check it out. And now, without further ado, Brandice Daniel. So Brandice, thank you so much for joining us for an episode of Support is Sexy. I'm excited to have you here.
I am so excited to be here.
Excellent. So now the first question that I ask everyone, when did you first fall in love with entrepreneurship?
Oh my goodness. That's such a great question. I think I first fell in love with entrepreneurship as a child. And my dad was an entrepreneur. He has started a few businesses. He and my mom had a Hallmark shop, and he also had a telephone business and a couple other businesses as well. And I think the idea of just kind of owning my own was something that was instilled in me at a very young age, although my parents did not encourage me to be entrepreneurs.
Really? Why? Is that because of their own experiences with it, or what do you think?
I think at the end of the day, parents just want their child to choose a very safe route where they know there won't be a lot of bumps and bruises. And so they were pushing me towards becoming a doctor. That's a very, you have a very laid out plan. Anything else, that's untraditional, such as entrepreneurship, you don't know. There's lots of turns and twists, and you really can't predict what's next. And so I think as good parents, they just wanted something that they knew would keep me safe.
Now, you grew up in Memphis, right?
I did.
Now, what was a young Brandice like as a little girl?
I laugh because I see so much of myself in my 1-year-old daughter. I was always a risk taker. So the little girl Brandice was in the hospital probably once a year for something that I had done. Whether it was jumping off the curb, flipping off the piano stool, all kinds of things I have done. I just always wanted to take a risk. I was, my family called me clumsy, but I called myself a risk taker. Now that I look back, I was just always doing something that was a little bit dangerous. So that was kind of my growing up years. And I always sketched. So what's interesting is that you go into college and you think, what do I want to be? But really what you are has been there since you was a child. I always sketched. I always loved fashion. I could sit and look at a Vogue magazine for hours, even as a young kid. So I think that was kind of, fashion was something that was always in me as well. In the little girl Brandice.
It's so funny that you mentioned that, and thank you for saying that, because it's one of the reasons that I always ask women about their childhood, ask a few questions about who were you as a little girl, and what were you like, and some of your influences, because most people, if they don't already recognize it as you do, they go back and say those things and they think, oh, I didn't even realize that all of those things played into who I am as an entrepreneur now.
It's so true. I would just my mother hate picking out clothes for me because I was always so particular about what I was going to wear, super particular about how my hair was going to be. We would go in Hancock's Fabrics, and my mom made some of our clothes, and I could sit in there and look at patterns for hours and hours. It was just something that was always there. So evident. You're right. Whatever you are, you see it even as a young kid.
And it's funny that it's still, for a lot of us, in choosing what kind of business we want to go into or what we want to experiment with, some of us forget to look back at that part of us that was always interested in whatever that thing was. I know I speak to a lot of women entrepreneurs who are starting their business or thinking about what they want to do or changing careers. And, they say, I don't know what I want to do, or I don't know what I'm passionate about or what my interest is. And you sort of have to take people back to that time when it wasn't tied up in how much money is it going to make, and is it going to do well on social media, and all these other things that we apply to our passions now.
Absolutely.
Yes, excellent. Now, you mentioned that you were so into fashion, obviously, as a child, and sketching and all of those things. But when you went to school, you started off as a pre-med major, right?
I did. I did.
And was that because of the path that your parents kind of laid out for you?
Let me tell you, Elayne, my mother had decided I was going to be a pediatrician. She would see me with children and say, Brandy, you're so great with children. You really should be a pediatrician. And she literally made me think that was what I wanted to be. So yes, I did go into college as a pre-med major. And literally after the first semester, I was like, this is not for me.
And you just knew you changed.
I changed. I was like, I don't know what it is, but I know this is not it.
Tell me what the conversation was like then with your parents when you decided to make that change, because I'm sure it wasn't, well, I won't project what I think it was. Just let us know what it was. What was that moment like for you?
It was tough. It's one thing saying, Mom, I'm changing my major from pre-med to engineering, or, pre-med to education, or something else that felt familiar to my parents. But saying I'm changing my major from pre-med to fashion merchandising was, that did not get the best response from my mom. My dad really was okay with it, but my mother was like, are you sure? What are you going to do with that? And now you have all these different fashion shows on television, and there's a lot of exposure to this industry, and that was not the case in 1995. So right. Then, people really just didn't know, what in the world are you going to do with the fashion degree? And so it was tough, but my mom has always maybe not agree with my decisions, but respected them.
And did you even know at that time what you were going to do with your degree? Because as you said, there weren't all the fashion shows and all of the things. All it was really was designer or going into the marketing side or the business side. But I feel like even that, I have friends who were fashion merchandise majors. It's sort of, they just knew that they loved fashion and the rest was, I'm going to figure it out.
I really didn't know. I thought I wanted to be a visual merchandiser, so I got some experience doing that. I thought I wanted to become a buyer. I was able to eventually get some experience doing that. I really didn't know, but I did know that I was on the right floor. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I always kind of say to people when they don't know what they're going to do, like, well, are you even on the right floor? Because you might bump into it if you're on the right floor. So I knew I was on the right floor, you know, in the things that I was trying. I just didn't know exactly which door would be mine.
Right. Now, how do we know when we're on the right floor? I think that's such a great analogy. Or how did you know in that moment that you were on the right floor at least?
The same thing you said earlier, Elayne, like when you know kind of what's called you, even before you've called it. So fashion called me way before I knew that that was what I wanted to do. And so I think when you kind of understand, like, this is the thing that innately I'm drawn to. This is the thing that gets me most excited. This is the thing that I could do if nobody paid me 1 cent. I would do it anyway. I think when you're doing something in that field, even if you don't know that, like, what exactly I want to do with this, I think there's so much, you know, proximity is power, right? So being in a place where you at least are doing something that interests you opens other doors. It will eventually come. It's just a challenge sometimes when we're on, you know, we're on the first floor and what we want to do is on the 15th floor.
Right, so exactly. And there's no elevator.
Right. You got to take the stairs. But when you're at least on the right floor, it's just a matter of, you know, you peeking into different doors and seeing which one is the right door for me.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I think, too, it's important for people to remember, for our listeners, the importance of that sort of experimentation or being curious and figuring out what the right floor is or what the right door is to peek into. Because sometimes I think we sit back and try to wait, as you said, for it to just come to us, as opposed to sort of meeting it halfway, that thing that you're supposed to be doing.
Absolutely.
So how did you get to the point? Well, tell us about your fashion career after you made the change and you said you got some visual merchandising experiences. How did that all lead up to the fantastic brand that you have today of Harlem Fashion Row?
So here's the interesting thing. When I graduated from college, I could not find any jobs in fashion.
And what school did you go to? Sorry.
I went to University of Tennessee at Chattanooga for my first degree.
Okay.
I eventually went to FIT when I moved to New York, but that was the school I graduated from at 21 years old. Mm-hmm. And could not find anything. So it was, for me, I wanted to move to Atlanta more than I wanted to work in my major. So I made the move to Atlanta, ended up working for an insurance company selling like all kinds of crappy insurance. I didn't know it at the time. And I did really well at it when I believed in it. When I believed in the product and I didn't understand that what I was selling was not good, I did extremely well at sales. And did that when I figured out, you know what, this actually isn't good for people. I could not sell it anymore. So I learned something about myself through that experience. I can't sell what I don't believe in. Mm-hmm. So after that, I worked for a home builder. Kept getting promoted there, and they eventually said, you know what, we're closing down our Atlanta operations. And I always knew while I was doing all these things that I just wasn't at home. You know, like, I'm doing these things and I started making a lot of money, but I just didn't feel at home. My spirit wasn't at peace because I wasn't on the right floor.
Right.
And so once they announced that they were closing our Atlanta operations, I said, you know what? This is my opportunity. This is the sign. This is absolutely for me. This is my chance to actually do what I love. And so I'm going to commit like the next year into doing nothing but finding a position in fashion. And so that's what I did. That actually, eventually, I was sleeping on my cousin's couch because I had to give up my apartment. And that got, old. Mm-hmm. So I ended up moving back to Memphis, which was devastating for me because if you're from a small town and you move to the big city, which in this case was Atlanta, and you move back, people are always like, oh, she's back. It's kind of like you went out there and you tried to do it and it didn't work and you had to come back with the rest of us. And that's what it felt like to me. And those were the kind of comments I would get and the kind of questions I was getting. It was really, really tough and embarrassing and a whole lot of other things. Little did I know was that my biggest blessing would come from being at home. And not to belabor that story, but I ended up working at a temp company filing. Now, here I am with a college degree filing for this company. Mm-hmm. But while I was there was a guy there, and he apparently saw something in me. And he said, Brandice, what are you supposed to be doing? And I didn't understand the question. And I said, what do you mean? He said, what are you supposed to be doing with your life? I know this isn't it. So I said, well, I'm supposed to be a buyer, because at that point I had decided I wanted to become a buyer. And he said, well, have you applied to Catherine's? I said, I did. I sent my resume to them, but I haven't heard anything back. So he ended up looking at my resume and saying, okay, I see why they haven't hired you. And he redid my entire resume. He and I did it. I sent that same resume to Catherine's, which was a corporate office that was based in Memphis at the time. And they called me the same day.
Is it? It's a fashion, a department store or something?
It is. It's for plus size women. It's a specialty store for plus size women.
Okay.
And they called me the same day. And it wasn't in buy-in, but it was in allocations. But honestly, I would have gone there as a janitor. Right. I had gotten to the place where let me just get my foot in the door. And if I get my foot in the door, I'm going to kill it. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't care what the position was. I was like, absolutely, I'll take it. Took the position, got there, ended up being promoted to buyer eventually, and always knew in my heart that I wanted to move to New York. So I was already kind of planning it, didn't know exactly how I would do it, how I would save enough money. And one of the vendors that I worked for, who was out of New York while I was working at Catherine's, offered me a job in New York.
Wow.
Yes. So...
Look at that. And thank you, first of all, so much for sharing that story. I think for so many reasons, it's so important just for people to see, too. I always talk about sometimes taking a step back. In your case, as you mentioned, to move home, a step back is not the same as a setback. You know, yeah. You're stepping back to look at how am I going to move forward in a different way if something that you were doing wasn't working, which is what you did. And I'm sure I always say this, you could not have scripted that. So the guy I'm going to meet at the temp age, when I'm working as a temp, is going to be the person that gets me a job at the company I've been applying. You know, you just never, I think back to your point about being on the floor, you never know how you're going to get to that floor, but it's sort of making sure you're able to say, I think in your case as an example, what you want, what you're interested in, what you're looking for, even if you don't know how you're going to get there. Because could you have predicted that that's the way that you would have made your way to New York?
Never. And
imagine if you would have just stayed in Atlanta and just said, oh, well, this is what it is, as opposed to taking that. That's offense. I love that story.
Elayne, let me tell you, when I tell you that was the lowest moment in my life, filing papers, because I was making really good money in Atlanta. And to go back home and to file papers, I would literally go to Walmart at nights because that's what I did. Nothing else was open after like 12 o'clock. And I would just walk the aisles and have breakdowns. That's where I would do all my crying. I just felt like I know there's something so much greater for me. How did I end there? And little did I know that God had placed me right there to get exactly what I was supposed to get to take me where I needed to go.
Wow. And how did you get through those moments of walking through the Walmart aisles crying, or just that feeling? Because I know a lot of us, go there at different times, even if we already have a business. And as you know, some days you just got to walk through the Walmart and cry because you don't know what else to do. So,
Elayne, I listen to Yolanda Adams every day. I still which CD is it? I still know that it was a tape at the time. I know that entire tape by heart, the entire thing. And that's what I would do. I would literally listen to her going to work, coming home. I would cry singing while I was going there. It was really, really tough. Mm-hmm. I mean, even thinking about it brings tears to my eyes. I still remember the feeling of just feeling like I'm so far from my purpose. And I'm so far away from what I'm supposed to be doing. And this is so embarrassing. And, just feeling like I had fallen so far, not realizing that where I was supposed to go. Like I was literally right where I was supposed to be.
That's right. You have to tell me later when you remember the name of that album. I'll link to it in case people want to hear that Yolanda Adams
I
album.
absolutely will.
We'll find out later and have a link. So now after you've gone to New York, and what was the job that you received? Was that a buyer position in New York?
I was a production coordinator.
Okay.
That's what I was. That was my title. So the company International Intimates that had hired me, they had just broken the Victoria's Secrets account. And I had gotten to be really good friends with one of the women that worked there. And it was a small company, and there was only a few people working on this account. I think maybe 5 people working on this account at the time when they hired me. And what's interesting, in that is that she was the woman who I would talk to. She was actually a young assistant. We were about the same age. We would both be at work to 8 p.m. and we would be talking to each other. And every time she called, I wanted to know how she was, how business was. I always just made small talk with her. We kind of built a friendship. Mm-hmm. And so that's why, she recommended her boss to hire me. But it was a production coordinator position for the Sexy Little Things account with Victoria's Secrets. I wasn't working directly with Victoria's Secrets. I was working with the company who Victoria's Secret hired to produce their garments.
Okay, and then how did you make the transition, or what moment did the idea come to you to create Harlem Fashion Row? How long were you in the business, and what did you begin to see that made you feel like this was a need that you needed to fill?
Okay, so this is when being on the right floor again comes into play.
Okay.
Because here I was in New York, which for me, New York was the right floor, by the way. Mm-hmm. So I knew I was supposed to be here. So I was in New York. I was working a job that I actually really, really enjoyed. I still enjoy apparel production. And I was figuring out, like, what's that thing for me? I know that there's something else. I like this, but it isn't my purpose and it isn't my calling. What is that? So I thought that it was going to be owning a boutique. And I had come up with a name for a boutique and knew kind of like I wanted a men's boutique. And so I ended up asking this guy, B.O. Yama, who had opened a boutique on the corner of where I lived in Harlem, if I could volunteer there. Because he had told me he couldn't afford to hire someone. So I said, well, can I just volunteer and maybe you can give me a shirt here and there. Mm-hmm. But so I did that. So I volunteered for him for almost 6 months. And so volunteering with him, I realized this is not what I want to do. I cannot be stuck in a boutique. This doesn't fit my personality. But he and I had developed a great relationship. So moving on, I went to a fashion show at this restaurant in Brooklyn, downtown Brooklyn, with a friend, Camila. We get to the thing. It was really nice for us. We had never really been to any fashion show in New York, so it was a really big deal. Just being there. And I still don't know who put this event on. I wish I knew. I would call them and thank them. But, and so while we're standing there, the models are walking down, everyone's standing up. And I had an idea and I was like, I want to do this in Harlem. And it was one of those things, sometimes you get an idea that something happens in the pit of your stomach. Mm-hmm. Like this idea just kind of like drops in you. And it was one of those kind of ideas. So I stopped watching the fashion show. I went to a chair and I was just thinking, and the ideas were just coming of what this would be. And because I had the relationship with B.O. Yama, I was like, he'll definitely do it. I'll have him in the fashion show. I'll have maybe 4 of the brands in the fashion show. So my friend comes looking for me after the show, wants to know what in the world happened. Why'd you go sit down? So I tell her, I've got this incredible idea. I want to do this fashion show in Harlem. I want to really highlight like all these Black-owned boutiques that are in Harlem that are popping up. And so we just brainstormed all the way to the Upper West Side where there was like another party going on. And I could not stop thinking about it. And that was in May of 2007. So I had to go home to Memphis, like maybe a few weeks later. So I went home to Memphis. I still had this idea brewing. So I need to send out letters to the boutique owners that I want to be in the fashion show. None of them knew me. I was a complete nobody. Mm-hmm. The only person who knew me was B.O. Yama. And as soon as I told him the idea, he said yes. So I used him as leverage to bring on the other designers. And you have to remember, like, designers are super duper protective of their brands, and they're not going to connect a brand that they have worked so hard on to some, young
Right.
young lady, some woman from Memphis
right.
that nobody knows. Nobody could vouch for me. They couldn't call anybody and say, oh yeah, she's good. So I sent them all letters. I still have the letters, actually. It was on chartreuse paper. I had them in brown envelopes. I wrote on them with this gold ink, and I tied a brown ribbon around the letter because I wanted to be able to say that I'm the woman who sent you the letter, the green and brown letter, basically, or chartreuse and chocolate, as I would normally call it.
Chartreuse.
So I was like, I want to be able to say that. And I know that they don't get letters like this. So this is a way for me to stand out. And so that's what I did. And I called them all, and they all remembered the letter. And they said, yeah, we got it, but I don't think we're going to do this. We're not familiar with you or your brand. And at the time, I didn't even have a name for the brand. I don't even think I had Harlem's Fashion Row. Can't remember what I called it, but they didn't know me. And so I had Bio Yama who had said yes, and I had 4 no's. And another thing about the little girl brand that's growing up is that I never took no as a no, ever, as a kid. It drove my mother nuts, but I never did. I would always try to negotiate. And so I kept going back to all these boutiques who had told me no, kept going back to them over and over and over again, like showing up in person and talking to them and trying to talk them into it. And finally, I got a yes from one, which was Denim Library. And then I kept going back to the other 2, which was Pieces in Montgomery. And they kept saying, we just don't know. We just don't know. We just don't know. And finally, Letitia got sick of me coming to her boutique. And she said, you know what? I'm going to do this. Where's that paper? Let me sign it right now.
So you can stop coming up here.
So I could stop coming to her boutique. Because at this time, I was going to the Harlem one. But then I was in Brooklyn. So I was like, okay, let me go to the Brooklyn boutique.
Right.
And so that was she signed the contract in the Brooklyn boutique. And then Montgomery, I finally was able to say, hey, I got 3 confirmed. And I just need, you to come on board. And finally she said, well, can I close the show? And I said, well, let me think about it and I'll come back. Knowing I wanted to say, yeah, of course.
Right.
But I had learned some things from my father. And I said, well, let me think about it. And I came back and I said, yes. So I had 4 out of the 5 to say yes. But it was not an easy task at all.
Well, the important thing about that you kept going back, and what would you say when you went back? Was it that you were convincing them that this was something they should participate in, or were you explaining to them what your mission was? I'm just interested in how you sort of negotiated that no.
So every time they would say, no, we don't know you, I would say, you know what? Don't say no right now. Just tell me you'll still think about it. Can you just tell me you'll still think about it? And they say, okay, fine, we'll think about it. And I say, okay. And then I'll go back and I say, hey, I know you had some time to think about it. Here's what's happening. And I kind of give them like all the updates. Like I've confirmed a venue. I've got this person confirmed or that person confirmed. We would love to have you. I can see, this is how we would do it. And I promise you can trust me. I will make sure that I take care of your brand the same way that you would. And I would just and they would say, I just don't know. I just don't think I'm going to do this. No, I just don't know. And I said, okay, well, don't tell me no. Just tell me you'll think about it again. And that's how I would leave it every time. Wow.
Just let them keep keeping the door open.
Yes.
I love that. And Ms. Montgomery's still there. I remember I think I have a jacket from there from years ago.
She's not, but she had the most fantastic clothes in the cutest boutique.
Yes, such a cute boutique. That's amazing. So what was it like when you finally got those 4 yeses?
It was amazing. I was still going after the 5th, of course, in true Brandice fashion. But it felt great. And I didn't know what I was doing, Elayne. And I was having meetings at my house every Saturday with about 20 volunteers who I had met, basically giving them kind of the same pitch. I would make them basically bribe them with biscuits and bacon and eggs every Saturday morning.
I love it.
And that was kind of how we started. And once the first event happened, I knew during the process, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, because I had never felt so passionate about anything in my entire life. There would be days when I would feel like flying, like literally flying. And then there would be other days when I wanted to get under my bed and be like, what in the world did I just do? This was a big mistake. I don't know what I'm doing. And so I would have these mix of emotions, but through it all, like I could not stop thinking about it. I couldn't stop talking about it. My friends would even say, Brandice, just give us like 5 minutes, like literally.
You're not talking about
this.
Yes,
just 5 minutes of you not talking about this. And I was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't really understand it. I know that this is way bigger than me. I know the purpose is way bigger than me. And I know that I'll understand it at some point, but this is definitely what I'm supposed to be doing.
Wow. And now you were still working full time when you were creating this event, right?
Yes.
So you had to balance both. Now tell us about how you were able to finally pull the event together. And the event, the first one was a fashion show featuring these designers. Mm-hmm. How were you able to do that? Did you work after hours, or was it just on those Saturdays, or how did you manage doing that? Because I know some of us think we have to give up one thing to do the other right away, as opposed to feeling it out and making it kind of all work as best we can.
Oh my God, I would not advise giving it all up right away. Right. That would not be my advice. I worked at night, so I was actually in school at the time too. I was in school part-time.
Wow.
And so I would literally, HFR would be everything I did in between, with some overlap, of course. So, but that was what I did. When I got home from school, I would, work on HFR. The nights I didn't have school, I would work on HFR. I would get up in the mornings, work on it. Honestly, at that time, and I was really young too. I mean, really young. I was 30, but sleep was not that important to me at all. And I think when you have like a brand new, fresh idea, there is something about that feeling and moving towards something, like really moving towards it, not thinking about it, but actually moving towards that thing. You will figure it out and you'll find a way. You'll find the time, you'll find a way, you'll find the resources, you'll find all of it, because it becomes almost like a driving force for you. For me, it did.
Right. I totally agree. I mean, I even feel that with this podcast, it's the same thing, just doing everything myself, and you feel exhausted. And some days you don't feel like you're going to be able to make it or do it on time or whatever it is. But I know it's the right floor. As you said, you're moving in the right direction, that kind of thing.
Yes.
Now, Harlem Fashion Row is much bigger than just the annual event. At this point, it's been how many? I'm doing the math. 9 years. 9 years. Next year will be your 10th year anniversary. Yes. Oh my gosh, I can't imagine what that's going to be like.
Yes.
Now, what would you say, though, is the primary focus overall for the brand and what you offer to people as CEO? What do you see as your primary vision for it?
My primary vision, so the first 10 years, we spent a lot of times really providing a platform for multicultural designers. And that's what I would always say. If you're part of HFR, you'll definitely get the platform. You'll definitely get connected to editors and press and media. And that's great. But what I realized was that after doing that for 9 years and seeing designers who would come into the market, get incredible press in the most incredible outlets, be worn by these huge celebrities, and then a few years later they drop out the business because they can't afford to stay in the business. And what I realized from that was that, okay, the next 10 years of our business, what am I going to focus on? Because the press, the media, that's really, really great, but it's not sustainable for designers. And so we're committed for the next 10 years on working on designers' businesses and growing their business and their revenue. Mm-hmm. And so that is a huge focus of mine. I actually just started a beta group with 5 designers, and I'm working with them myself on sales strategy and providing sales opportunities for them. And it's been incredible. I told my mom, I was like, I've never worked this hard for designers, but it is the most incredible feeling, just kind of walking them through and building out sales plans and sales strategies. And then in addition to that, we're really going to focus on being a resource for people who are looking to get into the industry. So doing more workshops, connecting them with people who have already kind of made it in the industry, and making sure that they kind of have access to those people so that they can get that knowledge and to get where they want to go.
Excellent. So kind of shifting or if not shifting, including education as more a part of the process as well for the designers and, like you said, people who want to enter the industry.
Absolutely.
Very smart. That's brilliant. Will you still have the events as well, you think, or will that look a little different?
We will, but it's going to look a little bit different because I think in everything we do now, sales is going to be a big piece of that. Mm-hmm. So, our 10th year event, this will be the first time that we open it up to have like some people who may not be in the fashion industry, but that want to attend, will be able to attend for the first time with a lot of events that we're doing. So we're doing an event in LA in February, New York in February. And then we have 2 events that we're taking to Chicago and DC, mm-hmm. and then we'll be back in New York in September. So it's kind of about also including consumers in the events so that the events benefit the designers in more than one way.
Where can people who are listening go to find out about these events? Has it been announced formally yet? Is it up on your website, or where will they go?
It has not been announced formally yet. However, we will be announcing them formally in December.
Okay.
So if people, if you go to our website, harlemsfashionrow.com, it'll be up there in the month of December. You can also follow us on our social, which on Instagram is at Harlem's Fashion Row. That's kind of our main platform. And so we'll be announcing it there as well.
Excellent. Now, I know another thing that you are committed to is helping others take what you call cliff jumps in business, yes. which yes. I love. Now, why do we need to be brave enough or braver to take that jump, the cliff jump? And what is the cliff jump?
The cliff jump is about, feeling the fear and taking the risk anyway. And, everything that has happened in my life, like everything that, like, I'm talking about those moments where, those pinch me moments, those moments where I just cannot believe, like, is this my life? All of those moments have happened for me taking a cliff jump every single time. And I just know that Harlem's Fashion Row would not be where it is. I would not be where I am right now at all. I wouldn't be able to share the knowledge that I've received over time with other women. I just wouldn't have any of that without taking these major risks or steps of faith or cliff jumps, mm-hmm. So I just wouldn't. And I think sometimes we're so afraid of failing and we're so afraid of what could go wrong. And we never stop to think, but what are all the things that could go right?
Right, exactly.
And at the end of the day, what's the worst that can happen? Are you going to die?
I always say, are you going to die from this?
You're not going to die from it. So it's like, take the risk. And I mean, the way that God works when we start to take steps of faith is that he meets us there. Earlier you were like, people wait on things to come to them. They don't realize they have to go to it. It's the same thing with taking these cliff jumps. Like, people say, I have faith, and they're like waiting on some miraculous thing to like come be dropped into their lap. And God is like waiting on them to take steps. And every single time, I mean, I could go on and on. I probably have a whole book of cliff jumps that I've taken. And
there's an idea.
There is an idea. I actually am in the middle of writing a book. I didn't call it Cliff Jump, but I might consider changing the title.
Yeah,
but so many times I've taken these crazy, what people would call crazy risk, and every time something incredible has come from it.
Excellent. Now, would you say, I know some entrepreneurs talk about how entrepreneurs are actually risk averse. It's just how we assess that risk is a little different than other people. So it's not doing something, as you mentioned, for example, not giving up everything as soon as you start your new venture, sort of keeping whether your full-time job or school or whatever that is. So there's risk there, but it is still thought out, I should say.
Absolutely. And every time I've also taken a cliff jump, I've literally been led to do that. Mm-hmm. So, it's not just some pie in the sky idea Brandice has had. I've literally felt in my spirit, this is something that I'm led to do.
Right.
And then I've done it. And I've said, you know what? I don't know how this is all going to come together, but I know that this is what I feel like God has led me to do. And so I do it.
And you know that you're going to do everything in your power to make it work.
Absolutely.
that's part of the meeting them halfway. That's what I say. You have to do everything. Like you said, people sometimes are waiting for God to drop something in their lap. And God is like, look, I gave you everything you need to sort of.
I gave you everything you need. Mm-hmm. And people use money as an excuse so often. Right. And when I tell you that if you're doing what you're led to do, And you know that you're led to do that. And if you take this step, you literally have to just watch. It is the most amazing thing. Elayne, I've had sponsorships come through a week before an event. And on more than one occasion, I've committed to having big, huge, amazing, incredible venues because I knew that I was supposed to do it there, but I did not have the money to do it at the time.
Right.
And every single time, everything I needed has been provided.
Now, with going for sponsors, did you have to apply the same, at least early on? I'm sure now it might be a little bit different, but early on when you were going after sponsors who didn't know you or you hadn't done an event before, was it the same kind of thing of not taking no for an answer?
It was a couple. I had to learn. Elayne's a whole nother podcast. I had to learn so many things on sponsors. But I will say the biggest lesson I learned when working with sponsors is that they're buying you, not your product. And in the beginning, I thought that because Harlem's Fashion Row was so purposeful, and it was what was most important to me was HFR, not Brandice, and so I kept selling HFR, and I missed the opportunity to show people who I was, and I was losing because I was doing that. And I had a friend who was, she was a marketing VP, and she told me, Brandice, when we sponsor things, we're not necessarily sponsoring the event, we're really sponsoring the person. And it took me a long time to get that. If I had to give any, and I actually have a full sponsorship course on Udemy, and it'll also be on Harlem's Fashion Row soon. But the biggest thing I would say is just know that people are buying into your passion. They were buying into my commitment. And I just didn't know it.
Wow.
It took me years to figure that out.
That's great advice, because sometimes we hear the thing of putting your brand first and not making it about you. But now, unless it's all about your personal brand. But as you said, this is sort of where both of them have to be as special as they need to be for sponsors or whoever to be interested. It's not one or the other.
Elayne, the hardest thing for me was when people will say, well, Brandice, you are HFR. And I'd be like, absolutely not.
Right. I'm
not HFR. Are you crazy? HFR is so much bigger than me. And I had to realize that I'm like, the spirit of HFR, I carry that. And I determine that, and I dictate that. So you do, like, Elayne is the person who carries the spirit of support is sexy. You know what I mean? So, like, and no one else can carry it the way that you can, because God didn't give it to anyone else but you.
Right. Amen.
So, yeah. So that was the thing I had to learn. Trust me, it took a long time.
Now, the sponsorship course, or did you say that it's up already on Udemy?
It is.
It is? Okay.
It's on Udemy now.
So I'll get the link for that from you too, so I can share that with everybody listening, and they can go check that out.
Yep. It's also on Teachable, so I'll give you that link as well.
Okay, perfect. Now, you've also created a community called the Great Girlfriends, which I'm a part of, which I love.
Yes.
And you have your podcast is weekly, right? With your co-host, Sybil. Tell us how that came about, the Great Girlfriends group and the podcast, and what you're offering in that space.
So the Great Girlfriends, so interesting. Again, like, right, just being on the right floor. So friends have been such a big piece of Harlem's Fashion Row. My friends have supported me from day one. Anytime I've had a challenge, I've gone to my friends. And I met Sybil probably 9 years ago. And you can't meet Brandice without meeting Harlem's Fashion Row. It's not possible. So you meet me, you meet HFR. And so I met her, talked about what I was doing, and she immediately said, you know what, my husband's a graphic artist. I'm going to have you talk to him about your brand. So I talked to him, and he was like, I want to gift you with your logo. And so he gifted me with my logo, the same logo I use to this day. And we just built this friendship, honestly, based on them really supporting me and what I was doing with HFR. And when I had challenges, I would go and lay on their couch and talk to them, and they really became like family to me. And so Sybil was talking about making a transition from her job, and she and I were just kind of having a conversation. And I said, we both believe in giving back and sharing our knowledge, and mentoring is a big part of both of us. And so we just were talking one day, and we said, you know what, we should do a podcast. And we started talking about this podcast, and what all we want to discuss and who we would target and kind of how open we would both be. If we were going to do it, we were like, we have to be really vulnerable. Like, there's enough fluff out there. We have to share all of our good, bad, and ugly. And so we started it, and we didn't even have a name when we started. The very first 2 episodes, if you go back and listen to the first 2 episodes, I think we called it like Girl Talk or Girl Chat. Mm-hmm. And so we got the title for it, and we thought, okay, we'll have like, we'll send this out to like 100 friends, and this would be a place where when people want advice, we'll say, go listen to this podcast. This is where I put everything I know. Had no idea that people would share it and that they would share it and that it would get shared and shared and shared. And really quickly, we got up to like 1,000 listeners in probably less than a month. And we were blown away. Mm-hmm. And it's just grown over time. We're up to, I believe, 75,000 listeners now. And I believe it's just because people don't realize the power of friendship. There's so much power in friendship and in women coming together and supporting each other. And that's what our entire platform is all about.
I love that. Now, how did you go about, well, it sounds like it was organic. I was going to ask you about building the community because in your Facebook group, I know it's over 13,000 members or at least 13,000 members and continuing to grow. Did that grow organically for you by just setting up the space and, as you mentioned, sharing your friendship and advice with people?
It has all grown organically. Mm-hmm. All of it. Like all of it's been through, people just sharing. And we would say like, hey, can you guys invite other friends to the group? And one thing I know that has always worked and has worked for me very, very well with HFR and building relationships is giving people personalized attention, whether that's me sending them cupcakes, sending them a card in the mail, sending them something for their birthdays, being thoughtful. And so what I did the same thing. So when people would invite girlfriends to the group, I would literally thank them like name by name. Mm-hmm. So thank you, Elayne, for inviting so many great girlfriends to the group. And when people see that you appreciate them, they're like, oh my God, let me invite more. And the other women will, well, let me do it too. And so it kind of became, again, like this kind of movement of women just inviting more women to the group.
Mm-hmm. So smart. Now, on a recent episode, you talked about the importance of rest.
Yes.
And with you juggling so much, I won't say I hate the question, but I know women always get the question about balance, especially if you have children and all that stuff. Men never get that question.
Yeah, but they never do.
They never do. But I do want to ask you, how do you make sure that you get enough rest with all of the things that you're doing and that you give yourself permission, which is something you talked about, to take a rest, which is the biggest thing we all face?
Yes. You know what's so funny? I actually get really good rest now that Sky is on a schedule. So now that she goes to bed at 7, I spend a couple hours working and I get rest. I think, when Sybil and I recorded that episode, both of us were so tired. And so we were thinking, we had come up with all these different episodes that would be so great for the Thanksgiving holiday. And we go through this back and forth. And until it clicks for both of us, we're like, I don't really like that. I don't really like that. I don't love it. I don't feel it. We go back and forth. And then when we said rest, we were both like, yes,
because I'm so tired.
I'm so tired. I'm so excited to talk about rest while I'm so tired. But I think it's, I always say my world is one big pot of soup. I don't really separate them out. My husband is involved in all my businesses. My friends all know about all my close friends are, they're used to me talking about my businesses all the time. Mm-hmm. And so I don't really separate anything. I have it as one big thing, and it just kind of makes my life a little bit easier that way. Mm-hmm. And then I just take the time. If I need to shut down, I will say, you know what, I'm really tired. Rich, what are you doing Saturday? And I will block off time with him and say, can you, make sure that on Saturday you don't schedule anything to 2 because I really just need to sleep.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Yeah. So scheduling is a big part of it.
Yes.
Not trying to do everything around the clock.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Another smart thing that you mentioned too was that you, because I know I'm a night person and I'm trying to get better at getting up earlier instead of trying to work through things all through the night. But the importance of starting with a fresh mind, going to bed and saying, I'll start with it in the morning.
That is so big for me. I'm not a night person at all. And it's funny because Sybil is like a night person. And in the beginning, we were trying to figure out that dance because I was like, I'm no good. After 10, don't have me on any phone calls talking about business. Right. It's over. Brandice has shut down and she's left the building. Uh-huh. But I realized a long time ago that if I get up at like 4, I'm super sharp. And like what might take me hours and hours and hours to do, sometimes I can do in minutes in the morning. And I'm just super duper sharp in the morning. And so that's part of my strategy too. Just go to bed and wake up in the morning and get it done.
Now, just a few more questions. What would you say entrepreneurship has taught you about yourself as a woman?
First of all, I feel like a warrior as an entrepreneur. I will say I really feel like a warrior. And I feel like there's nothing I can't accomplish. I really honestly feel that. I feel like there's nothing that's off limits to me after going through challenge after challenge, after seeing God come through time after time after time after time again. I feel like no matter what situation I'm in, He has me. So I'm good. And He's proven that to me so many times that it really just builds a lot of confidence.
I love that. I feel like a warrior as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I do.
It. Now, if you think over your life and career and you had the chance to thank only one person whose support was critical to you personally or professionally, who would that be and what would you say?
Outside of God, it would be my husband. And I would say we were together. The year I started HFR was 2007. I met him in December of 2007. So he's been along with me in this entire journey. And it is not easy to be with an entrepreneur. And to be really honest, I don't know if I'd be able to endure some of the things he's had to endure. I think being so close to it and understanding all the challenges and all the things that could go wrong, for him to kind of stay in there and say, I'm going to be connected to this for the rest of my life. I don't know. I told my nephew, I'm like, I don't know how my husband does it with me. I really don't. I really don't. He just trusts me. I mean, when I started the Great Girlfriends podcast, I was 4 months pregnant and he didn't question it at all. And he, I said, I really feel like this is what I'm led to do. He was like, okay. Well, you feel like, and when I first had Sky, Sybil was literally spending the night over here every week.
Wow.
Every week, because we had to figure out a time to record. And he's just, oh my God, I can't even say enough. I don't even know how he does it, but he's so amazing and so super supportive. And, he doesn't need to be in the limelight. Nobody needs to know who he is. He doesn't care, at all. And he's not intimidated. And it just feels good to have someone who's by my side, who I know I can be 1,000% Brandice with.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
No
That's
problem.
Awesome. So now, in closing, tell us how we can support you, the website and social media. I'll have links to everything, but what should people be on the lookout for?
Absolutely. So definitely look for more pop-up shops for Harlem's Fashion Row, and you can go follow us at Harlem's Fashion Row, and all the information, like anytime we do an event, we post it there. I would love to connect with you personally, and my Instagram is at Brandice Daniel. And the Great Girlfriends, we're actually having a mastermind workshop that's going to come up. We're only having 10 slots. Sybil and I are going to be in that mastermind group. So if you have business challenges that you're facing right now and you're not sure what the next step is, that's a great event for you to be a part of. And that's on Eventbrite. If you just put in Eventbrite and put in the Great Girlfriends, you'll see it. It'll come up. You can also follow our Instagram at The Great Girlfriends there. Join our Facebook group at The Great Girlfriends. And I just look forward to connecting, and I'm excited to hear from your audience.
Yes, absolutely.
And to meet them. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be fantastic. So before you go, first of all, thank you so much. I'm so glad we were finally able to get together and do this.
Yes.
You were wonderful, as I knew you would be. Of course. Now, before you go, a parting piece of advice from you to our listeners.
Don't worry. Sometimes we're so bogged down with worrying, and before we even launch an idea or something, we're so worried about it, worried about what people are going to say. Is it going to work? Just stop the worrying and just start working. And when you kind of stop that mental hater in your own mind, so many great things happen. And we all have it. And just so you guys know, like, we all have it. We all have to turn them off at some point, right? Elayne?
Yes.
Don't he come?
Absolutely.
In our own head?
I always say the critic is always louder than the voice. It's like, no, you can do it.
Yeah, don't worry, guys. It's going to be fun. Guess what? If it don't work out, you can try something else. You've learned great lessons from it. You've met great people from it. Don't worry.
Don't worry. I love don't worry. Keep working.
Yeah, keep working.
I love it. Brandice, thank you so much. You've been fantastic.
Thank you so much, Elayne.
You're welcome. Hold on just a second.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that episode. And the challenge for you is to take at least one thing. You can always do more than one thing, but take at least one thing and incorporate that into your business today. Take action today. Also, be sure to go to supportissexypodcast.com to get more information about this episode and to see previous interviews that I've done with other fantastic women entrepreneurs. And while you're there, be sure to go to the free resources button so you can see what kind of resources I'm offering to you guys. Right now, it is a 3-part audio training on how to make brave decisions. The decision to do something is sometimes scarier than even the actual doing. So go to supportissexypodcast.com, go to the top, click free resources, and download that free audio training. All right, so thank you so much again for listening. Until next time, you know what to do. Go out there and create something sexy, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.